Glad you're with us tonight. We're back in the studio after a whirlwind tour across the Southeast last week. We're glad those of you in the FlashPoint Army were able to join us. We had a great time meeting all of you. Love to do more of that. After a long tour, it seems like he's been gone forever. Welcome back, Lance Wallnau, back from Israel. And Rick Green somewhere in America. Are you in a hotel room somewhere? Rick, where are you?
Man, I'm at a wonderful church in San Diego, California called Awaken. And they are an awake church. Not a woke church. They are awake. They fought all the COVID stuff 3 years ago. They were leading the way. Anyway, having a great time, believe it or not, behind enemy lines in California. You know, mission work.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, it's good. All right, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. All right, so listen, ladies and gentlemen, I want to jump right into our topics. We got a lot of ground to cover. This is what happened with Kim Paxton, AG of Texas, on Tucker. Watch what he had to say here.
Your acquittal, but I'm fascinated by the fact that you were impeached in the first place. How did this happen?
First of all, let me just say, it was, as you've read through this, very complicated.
It is complicated, yes.
It was crazy, but I truly believe it became very political. And I am sitting here because of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and I was delivered because it wasn't just about the law. It became political completely, and I didn't know how it was going to turn out on the political side.
All right, so you see that. Now, that's just we just teased you a little bit. We're going to follow this case, but of course, they tried to impeach Kim Paxton. It didn't happen. But there's so much more behind this case. Rick, why should we be concerned of what happened with Ken, and why should we, the Attorney General, why should we be watching what happens next?
Yeah, Gene, first of all, just real quick comment on what Lance was saying. So true. In that 61 years that Rocky was talking about, Engel v. Vitale in 62 was the one that took prayer out of school. Abington v. Shep, Murray v. Collette, the Nectar, the Bible, then Stone v. Graham, the Ten Commandments, all of that stuff. Gone, man. We now have the chance to do everything Lance was talking about. So praise the Lord. Let's press our advantage on that front. As far as Ken and this impeachment trial, it was just an absolute sham. In fact, I had Senator Phil King on a couple days after this thing was finally over and they could talk about it. And he laid out all the things that they did 100 years ago in the last impeachment on the House side before they impeached. And it was like night and day. They actually did an investigation. They actually did all the things they were supposed to do. This was a witch hunt after Ken. He's human, just like all of us. He's fallible. He made some mistakes that weren't criminal, but some personal issues. And that's why a lot of people went after him. I'm so glad to hear him, basically give his testimony there with Tucker. But the reason people should be concerned is because it's the same thing they're doing to Donald Trump. They're trying to use the legal system to stop their opposition. Here's the great news. This thing is backfiring big time.
Let's talk about, say the election. Let's talk about who's running. And I want to show you. Now, keep in mind what I'm about to show you, these next few clips, are from the mainstream media. So you need to kind of factor that in and know no matter how bad it sounds, it's actually worse or it's actually better, depending on if you're Donald Trump or you're Joe Biden. All right, look at this. Meet the press. Good news for Trump. Watch.
And you mentioned an uphill climb for these Republican opponents of Donald Trump. Let's show folks from our new poll exactly how steep it is. Look at this. Donald Trump, brand new national poll of Republican primary voters, nearly 60% support the former president. His nearest rival, Ron DeSantis, more than 40 points behind him now. Obviously, you can see here nobody else in single digits. And look at the movement, too. From the start of the summer, we polled this back in June. Trump seemed to have a dominant lead then. It has only gotten more dominant from 43 now. It was not even 30 in June. And you can see here, we asked the question. I think this gets to the heart of it. We asked Republicans, should Donald Trump be the leader of your party? And now nearly 60% say yes. It wasn't quite 50 at the start of the summer.
Well, Stephen, what's so stunning about this number, a lot's happened since June. We're talking 2 more indictments against former President Trump, so 4 in total, and the first GOP primary debate. And yet, Mr. Trump is just solidifying his lead with GOP voters.
And Kristen, you know this from talking to Republican critics of Trump from rival campaigns. Everything you just explained, they thought would take him down a peg this summer. And instead, he has only moved up here. You can see the numbers saying the party needs a new leader. That has gone down. So for Donald Trump there, nothing but good news. And it raises this question. If Republicans go forward and nominate Trump again, this is what the rematch in our poll would look like right now.
All right. So, Lance, you saw those numbers. Now, when the mainstream media says it's looking good for Trump, it's a lot better than what they're saying. However, they still come up with I think it was 46% to 46, Trump versus Biden. Do you think it really is that bad, or are we looking at something totally different?
No, I think that Joe Biden is self-destructing. You know, every day they're going to come out with another something against Trump, and it's going to look like it's just like it's a pile-on of personal attacks. What Biden has is a different problem. The news is going to continue to come out about Hunter getting money over to Dad through China by direct funding. It's going to be like the Menendez situation in New Jersey. It's just going to be so obvious that this is a criminal operation that the question will be whether Biden can survive all the way to being the candidate, or whether the party's going to try to really have a private meeting with him to get him to step down so they could try to run Harris against Trump.
Let me, Rick, what's your thoughts here? You think it's this is accurate? I mean, I know Trump's obviously shot up. It's like indict Trump, his numbers go up. Do something negative, his numbers go up. I think this is indicative of the American people saying we've had enough, leave the guy alone. Of course, there's the other side that says, oh, he's horrible, he's horrible. And, you know, let me just say right here, we're not on a Trump train. This is not the Trump News Network. But, however, we are telling you what is going on. This is news. Rick, what do you think what do you make of all this?
Yeah, well, and as you know, Gene, we predicted all of this right here on FlashPoint. We talked about the fact that every time he gets indicted, he goes up by, 5 or 10 points. It's a rallying cry because people are sick of the two-tier justice system. So when they see this abuse of the justice system, they know that's tearing down the fabric of the country itself. And so whether it was Trump or somebody else, I think they would want to rally to the defense of someone that's being, persecuted for their political beliefs, for simply questioning the outcome of an election. But then, of course, you have Trump's huge personality embracing these indictments. You know, most politicians run from that stuff. They're scared to death of it, or they would give up. This guy is a bulldog, man. He takes it head on. I have to say, though, Gene, I didn't hear a whole lot from that clip because I was stuck on the guy that was in the clip. I felt like we had a skinny Chris Farley saying, I thought any minute he was going to say down by the river. Anyway, right. That's for those that know. Well, I couldn't figure out what the guy was doing, but the numbers don't lie. And like you said, Trump train or not, the numbers don't lie. A lot of people say, oh, it's just polling. You can't believe it. These are consistent polls. As you know, I wanted to have a very spirited Republican primary to bring out a whole lot of things and make Trump even better for November. So far, that has not happened unless something changes drastically for Ron DeSantis. This race is going to be over before the Iowa caucus even happens.
Let's see what Meet the Press, same program, had said. There's bad news for Biden. Watch.
It's a simple question of job approval. Barely 40% approve of Joe Biden's performance.
And we have to note 56%. That's the highest disapproval rating for President Biden since he took office. That's significant.
Yeah, so let's take a look at what's driving that, too, here. In one big area, no surprise, it is the economy. Look at this contrast. This is April of 21, months after Biden took office. Nearly half the country was satisfied with where the economy was then. Now, barely 1 in 4 Americans satisfied with the economy. There's also this. We found an enthusiasm gap between the two parties. We ask folks on a scale of 1 to 10, how enthusiastic are you about the presidential election? And you can see Republican to Democrat, there is a gap right there. Where's the lag for Democrats? We found a couple places. Non-white voters, you can see significantly less enthusiastic than white voters. And then how about this age gap? The youngest group of voters who Democrats have been trying to get excited and motivated, nearly 50-point gap there.
So really an uphill battle to try to make sure voters don't stay home if you're Democrats.
Lance, there you go. That last little line right there sets everything up. Oh, boy. We know what's coming next. Go ahead. I'll let you take the first shot at that.
Well, listen, man, that's why I'm conflicted about all the impeach Biden rhetoric. You realize if any of that data is true and that there's, 46% or 50%, close to 50%, why is he even getting that? I mean, if Harris gets in there and they'll glamorize her as the first female African-American, even though she's not a candidate, it's going to take a while to take the gloss off of that. So Biden actually is a losable candidate. And it reminds me of and Trump, listen, not to say that Donald Trump is that popular. There's a high percentage of people in America that wish neither one of them would run. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here with premature celebration. The truth is that Donald Trump has negatives, just like Biden has negatives. It's going to come down to election fraud. And Trump says it. It's hilarious what he says. He says these people can cheat. Now, if he wasn't saying it, I'd be afraid of getting, cut off the air. But Trump's the one saying it. He said, we are going to have to show up, and we're going to have to also make sure that we do what we have to do in order to keep fraud from happening. Because in spite of the negatives, I think Trump's in a position to beat Biden, because Biden's a bit like, remember when the Jews were leaving Egypt? The chariots were after them, but God made the chariots lose their wheels. He made the Egyptians slower than the Jewish people. It's not that Trump is that popular in America. It's that Biden is going to continue to weigh down the ticket.
Rick, you hear what Lance is saying? We got the economy in there, too. Is it possible Americans are waking up? I mean, they got to know. I mean, Americans, they're not idiots. They're going to the gas pump and having to pay the price difference. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna triple down here, man, on what I said 2 years ago, and I may have to eat a lot of crow, but we're getting closer and closer, and they may prove me wrong. I just don't think there's any way Biden's the nominee. I mean, I think the weekend at Bernie's routine cannot last much longer. They know how unpopular he is. If they can replace him with Newsom or Michelle Obama, I still think Newt Gingrich called that one right months ago, that she's probably the one they're going to swoop in at the end without all the negatives, or at least not the big negatives. And then you got Trump with all the negatives. And I'm telling you guys, that's going to be a tough race to win, unfortunately. So I just don't think there's any way it's Biden. I don't think it's Harris either. She polls even worse than Biden. They're going to find a way to swoop in next summer really close to the last minute with a Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom. And so that's a big game changer, because now you don't have the lots of negatives, lots of positives against the lots of negatives, lots of positives. It's more of a clean slate and someone that hasn't ever had to vote on anything if it's her. So I hope that's not the case, but man, I'm still feeling those winds going that direction.
And I've seen a lot of it on social media too. Lance, you agree with that? You think we're going to see a Michelle Obama come forward?
Yeah, I said a while ago. I didn't know Rick said it also. I said their dream scenario is that Kamala would be gracious about realizing she has got some low approval ratings herself, because we've had a long time to examine her, and she's not really presidential for a lot of people. They would love to see, imagine like a Michelle Obama Newsom ticket. Maybe Feinstein steps down and Kamala goes and takes her seat. There's horse trading, and listen, the Democrats are capable of anything. We've seen that. So if they're thinking that they have to win, they could come up with that. But to your point, Gene, I heard you bringing the economy up twice. So let me make this statement.
Thank you.
Before, when we had $2 trillion, when we had $31 trillion of debt, nobody cared, because interest rates were 2% or 3%, or you could buy houses. Now, if you want to buy a house or sell a house, you're talking about 7 or 8% interest. It's 17% like interest is actually is the cost of food going up. It's different now. I'll be interested in seeing. They don't want to, for instance, right now, McCarthy, he's in this vice that Matt Gaetz has him in regarding whether or not he's going to be able to approve the deficit budget, and move this budget along. It'll be an interesting thing to see whether the American people are waking up to the fact that the economy is dangerously out of alignment. We cannot afford $2 trillion worth of a deficit, and that they actually start to line up and demand fiscal responsibility, because the issue is being raised right now. I'm looking forward to seeing if the American people are resonating with the fact that we have an out-of-control spending problem, because now they're going to feel it, and I think now you're going to start to see the economy become an issue.
Well, it's definitely an issue for Americans. That's for sure. All right, look at this. Look at what Hillary's doing. You may wonder, you're sitting at home going, what is Hillary doing? I'm glad you asked me that. Look at this. Inside with Jen Psaki. There's a show you want to watch. I fear that the Russians have proved themselves to be quite adept at interfering, and if he has a chance, he'll do it again. Is this not crazy? Watch.
Vladimir Putin has obviously your friend and mine.
Yes, indeed.
He has intervened in our election in the past.
Right.
It's not something, as you experienced firsthand, it's not something we talk about a lot. Do you fear that that is something that could be happening for 2024? And do you think we should be talking about it more?
Well, I think we should be talking about it more because I don't think, despite all of the deniers, there's any doubt that he interfered in our election or that he has interfered in many ways in the internal affairs of other countries, funding political parties, funding, political candidates, buying off, government officials in different places. So,
yeah, it's Russia's fault. It's Russia, Rick. I've been telling you, Hillary's been saying it. It's still Russia's fault.
Well, it goes back to exactly what Lance was saying. They truly believe they can say anything, get away with anything, facts, evidence, none of that matters. Now, you do notice the language changed, right, from Russian collusion, because it was undoubtedly proven that there was no collusion. But now it's just that they interfered. So if they got on some social media outlets and they put some bots on there, of course they would try things like that. That's what foreign entities do. But that somehow that changed the outcome for Hillary or whatever. All a bunch of lies. Listen, I just got to go back to the congressman a few minutes ago. I was listening to him describe the reasons that Kamala's polling so bad. And he listed a bunch of reasons, but he forgot the most important one. And I'm not going to be I'm sorry, I just can't be as diplomatic as Lance. It's because she's a moron. She doesn't have, I don't know how many brain cells she's got, but it's not many. Everybody knows it. When she starts talking, it's like you're listening to a kid's book. It's horrific, and they know it. And so they cannot afford to have her out front. It's why I don't think your 6-month scenario would actually end up happening. I guess it could if Biden falls over, completely incapacitated. Maybe we'll invoke the 25th, which should have already been invoked. But you raise a great scenario, Gene. For them, it's a great out for the Democrats to just let her, walk around as president for 6 months, but have somebody in the wings that's actually going to be the candidate. I think if that happens, though, she's going to run. I just don't think she can even win a Democrat primary. I mean, think about how bad she did the first time around when she ran for president.
Yeah, she was less than 2%, and that's why she had to drop out. Anyway, all right, Lance, your thoughts, with the Hillary and Kamala, Russia collusion, it's Trump's fault. Anything you want to wrap up there before we move on?
Well, I mean, it's just so painful to hear somebody say, after the evidence we have of Russia collusion being her funding Perkins Coie to create a fake dossier with fake FISA warrants that were documented by the FBI and doctored up. The whole thing, she should actually be in court instead of Trump because she actually did a crime. But there's a verse in this Bible here, and I'm serious about this. This will put the fear of God in you. The Bible says, that there are people who, deceiving others, do so and then deceive themselves also. What you're looking at, and I'm serious about this, you're looking at a whole category of political people in Washington that start out being shrewd and manipulating the truth or saying a lie because they want to attack Trump over Russia. And then they come under a spirit of deception and they begin to believe the lie that they're speaking. I see it in Biden. I see it in all of them. It makes them dangerous because they don't have the ability to perceive reality.
No, it's so true. Well said. Well said. And, I think these guys they really are counting on the public to forget. Forget that whole Russia collusion thing. Forget that, that I was involved. Forget all that. We got to occupy until he comes. But, Lance, there's some good news. Tell us about what's going on in Atlanta.
Well, okay, so, we got frustrated with all these indictments. But let's wait a second now. Suppose, Gene, this is an idea. Suppose that these indictments are actually kind of like the devil overreaching and digging a pit for somebody else that he falls into himself. Sure, no, we've prayed those prayers and made those proclamations for a long time. Well, here's the situation in Fulton County, one of the most corrupt counties in the United States. Can you believe the chutzpah of Democrats that they actually have one of the most corrupt counties like Maricopa County or Clark County? We actually know the names of these places now. And there's like been 2 reports done on the corruption and the problems in Fulton County. But that's where they're charging Trump. Now, here's the good news. I did an interview today for our podcast with Coletta Mitchell, who is one of the lead attorneys at a conservative institute. She was called in to go immediately look into what the fraud problem in Atlanta by Mark Meadows, because Trump lost Georgia by only 11,700 votes. And they were convinced, the Dinesh D'Souza, 2,000 Mules, they knew there was all kinds of shenanigans. So they called her in to do some kind of an analysis. Here's what she got. On December 4th, she presented a 64-page complaint with 1,100 pages of verified affidavits and expert witnesses with evidence of the fraud in Fulton County and in Georgia. The chief judge, who is part of the corrupt apparatus with Raffensperger down there that never pushed for this trial, the chief judge waited 30 days to appoint a judge, just in time for the electors to be certified and the January 6th kerfuffle to happen. All right, so here's the problem they have in Fulton County. They've charged Trump with false allegations of election fraud, but they never heard the evidence he had. So now he's got 1,100 pages of verified witness affidavits ready to be presented. In other words, we actually can start to expose how the election was wrongfully determined with 11,000 votes, because they've set it up so that Trump's defense is going to be finally being able to make the case as to what they have for election fraud. So that's going to be an interesting exposure. Same thing with Jack Smith. If he wants to go with January 6th stirring up an insurrection, well, let's have the trial on what was not covered in January 6th, like how many FBI agents were involved. Why didn't they put police out there? Why did Pelosi refuse to bring the National Guard in? Why was the guy in charge of the police department in D.C. kept in the dark? All of that now comes out in a trial. It's all part of the evidence. So I think there's a silver lining in this. It may not be the conversation we want to have now, but it's an overdue exposure of the truth.
Rick, you see this? You agree with Atlanta? I mean, this is good news coming out of Atlanta. It's a win you're not hearing anywhere in the mainstream media.
That's right.
You are on Victory News and FlashPoint and Lance Wallnau show. But tell me, what do you think? Is this, you think we're gaining some speed here?
100%. I think that was brilliant analysis by Lance. I think it's spot on. This opened a wonderful door for us. And it's the same thing we've talked about on the program several times. The left cannot control themselves. They always go too far. And just they were, I mean, literally just rabid about getting Donald Trump. They had to know there was a risk here that discovery in this type of a case in Fulton County would start leading to all this, but they just could not help themselves. And so here we are. And I think, it's a great time, Gene, what you were saying right before the break, or trying to say, and then you said it when you came back. But what you were saying, God does his best work in these tough times for us. Right. The other night when we had our big Constitution Day celebration, Kirk Cameron told the story of King Alfred and how he was completely decimated. There was no way he was going to win against the Vikings, and God just gave him a miraculous victory. Man, that was 1,300 years ago, 1,400 years ago. God still moves, and I don't care what they do in the elections, how much they cheat, all the things that they're doing. God knows what's coming, and he's positioned us for such a time as this to be the truth tellers, getting this truth into the hands of the American people. But people that are watching right now, you cannot be so dismayed that you stay home and don't participate. I will not believe that the nation is incapable of being saved until 100% of Christians, Bible-believing, discipled Christians, are actually engaged and voting. And we're not even at half of that, Gene. So we got a lot of work to do, and we still have the peaceable means to win this whole thing. So I just want to congratulate you for what you were saying earlier. Thank you for keeping that spin on it. We need that. People need to hear that, because they're just getting beat up back home and seeing all this negative stuff. What Lance just gave us right there is that sliver of hope, that bright light in the darkness. And I think God's going to use those things for us in this next couple of years. I agree with that. All right. I want to get to this one last news story before we get to our guests we've got waiting. This whole thing down there at the border, it's hard to believe. You've been seeing the videos like I have, that there are people walking over
they might as well be driving, buses over. It's ridiculous. However, CNN, Jim Acosta had this to say about the border.
The Border Patrol agents do their job to get the wall built, have designated points of entry. And this administration is just not doing it. They're doing it intentionally. And whether you agree with it or not, they're doing it for power. Why are they giving Social Security numbers?
What do you mean by that? Why are you, what
does
this say? They're intentionally doing what? Where is your evidence of this? Where is your proof of this? It just sounds like you're throwing rhetoric around with no basis in fact.
No, you can. Have you been to the border?
Of course I have.
Have you seen what's going on? The rapes, it's open. I mean, nobody can deny that.
The border is,
and they've got it's a crisis. Where?
I'll ask the question, sir. And the border is not open. That is something that is peddled as a talking point, but it's not true. There are fences, there are walls, there are Border Patrol agents who work on the border.
I'll ask the questions. What are you thinking, Lance? I'll ask the questions. The border's not open. Pay no attention to those things, people walking through. Lance, do you think people still buy that the border's not open?
Well, here's the sad thing. You got the mayor of New York City right now who is saying, send us your border people. Now he's saying we're in crises we cannot come out of. We need $300 billion to pay for those. And you keep on. We can't afford to have another person come to our city. I think the problem with those talking points is we don't always have people that are on these programs that are actually prepared to answer. I mean, if that kind of a question, if that guest was on this show, they'd be piled on with data. Yeah. Because we've got footage and we've got facts about what's coming through the border. That's where the millions of illegals are getting in. My gosh, I could find them in Texas. I know, I shouldn't say this, I know of a place where you could find 30 illegal Venezuelans right now. But, the fact of the matter is, this is so distorted in the news media that America will not realize what the truth is until the flood hits their own neighborhood, which is happening in New York City right now.
Okay, speaking of that, look at this about the razor wire. Remember they put the razor wire, the state of Texas put that up? Look at what the CBP is doing. Watch.
In Eagle Pass, Texas, where just moments ago, Customs and Border Protection cut a hole through the concertina wire that has been stretched by Texas DPS along the border there to allow migrants to come through. It was initially a group of about 60 to 70 people. It swelled to some 300 very, very quickly. Some women and children who were sort of in the middle of the river were picked up by, I guess it would be Texas DPS, because they're running the airboats there up and down the river, and taken out of the water and to safer ground there. But as you can see, as we have watched for the last couple of weeks, the illegal migration across the river into the United States continues with this border crossing in Eagle Pass, seeing thousands of people. And then over the weekend, we set what we believe is a new record of 11,000 people crossing into the United States in a single day. We'll keep an eye on this for you.
11,000 in 24 hours. Come on, Rick. The border's not open. It's closed.
Lance mentioned Lance mentioned the facts. Listen, last month, 305,000 illegal immigrants across the border. Gene, we're looking at 10 million total at this point. And when people see what you just showed, the uninitiated, the uninformed might say, well, of course they should cut the wire and help those people out of the water. And for whatever reason, they're coming here for help, and we need to be helping them. By cutting the wire, by ushering them in, by busing them into wherever in the country, we are telling the rest of the world to come as well, which means more rapes, more children dying, more people dying of fentanyl, more border control by the cartels. They are destroying this nation, and they're destroying those people.
That's right.
And they always, of course, just show the women and children, not the military-aged men, which is most of the people that are coming across the border. Gene, it's got to stop. I do, again, think they've pushed so far. Greg Abbott continues to do a little bit more and a little bit more. If we can ever get him to truly seal the border and get operational control and take the illegals and place them back on the other side of the river and refuse to allow them to come across, that's when you'll see this thing finally change. But as Lance said, when you got the New York mayor whining because it's going to cost them $1 billion, it cost us about $13 billion a year here in Texas. So they're only feeling a little bit of the pain. I say keep making them feel the pain, and eventually these Democrats that created this situation will finally tell the president to close the border.
Up next for the FlashPoint Live Truth and Freedom Tour, we're headed to Minneapolis, Minnesota for a historical revival at Living Word Christian Center from October 5th through the 6th, an event you do not want to miss.
FlashPoint is incredible. You cannot explain what it's like until you see it live. When you're here in the building, there's just nothing like it.
For more information, visit us online at govictory.com/FPLive. Admission is free. Register today.